Thomas, thank you for joining me on the AP Pro Football Podcast. Really excited to talk to you about your football career and your post-NFL career. But first, tell me this, man. You played 12 seasons in the NFL. You had a ton of success, right? You were, I believe, the 25th running back to reach 10,000 yards. So when you look back on that part of your life, what does a milestone like that mean to you, 10,000 yards rushing?
I mean, it's everything, to be honest, for a running back. You don't realize how many yards it is until you retire. And then 10 years later, your knees aching in the morning, your hips, don't move the same. So that's when you really notice it. But I was so fortunate to have a really good career. There's only, I think, 31 players, running backs that have gone over 10,000 yards. And I'm fortunate enough to be one of them. And so it's a testament to, my teammates, my hard work, and dedication to the sport and to the game. It's weird now when I talk about the NFL because I played 10 years ago, I think was my last game, over 10 years ago. And now, it's sometimes like a blur. So with that being said, it was an incredible milestone, 10,000 yards.
What was it like growing up with a brother who also became an NFL running back? I mean, there's got to be a lot of competition in the house. And what was that like?
Actually, there wasn't much competition. I was the older brother. And so we didn't have that competitive brother relationship. I was more of a true big brother. I was always trying to encourage my brother and motivate him however I could. I was the big brother that brought my little brother everywhere. Regardless of where I was, I wanted him to be there with me. So it wasn't the typical competitive brother relationship. Although sometimes it did get that way depending on what video game we were playing. But outside of video games, it was pretty cordial. But it was incredible to have him playing the NFL as well. I think we were the first brothers in NFL history to rush for over 1,000 yards in the same season. And so that was a huge milestone for us as well, growing up as big football fans and also, two running backs.
You haven't played, like you said, in a decade. Do you watch the NFL? Do you follow it? What is your relationship with the league like? Do you, on Sundays during the week, and do you check out the running backs and see which guys you feel like are some of the best in the game?
Well, luckily we have Twitter, so I can move around. I can move around all day and work and do what I need to do, but I can also catch up on some of the games and some of the big plays on my phone. So I don't really watch the NFL. I think when I retired in 2012, I was just really burnt out from football. I played since I was 5, 6 years old, and I retired, I think, at 33. And so I had about enough of football. Although I love the game, I was ready to move forward and move on to something else. And I truly retired. I left the game of football mentally, emotionally, psychologically. Kind of hit the eject button and wanted to move on to something else. Although that competitive spirit is still in me, I think that's what kind of drives me now and my new ventures. I always love the game of football, but I definitely I don't keep up with it as much as I did, obviously, when I played.
Well, Thomas, what you moved on to was a very successful acting career. At what point did you decide that this is something that you wanted to try after the NFL? Was it during your time playing? Was it shortly after? Because it's not something that's a very easy accomplishment. You have to work hard for it.
I don't think it was something that I aspired to do, for sure. I think it was something that I just kind of fell into, and it ended up being what was meant to be. When I retired, I had a music company. I love music. I love to produce music and work with artists. And so I was in the music industry for about 7 years. And, I spent a lot of time in LA, a lot of time in Hollywood, but I wasn't the talent. I was the manager or, one of the producers or writers on some of these projects. But I started to work on a small project here in Miami where I live, and I took a small role and started producing it. And one of the actors, Clifton Powell, who's a legendary actor, played my uncle in the series, and he basically was like, "Hey, Thomas, I think you have some raw talent. I never really had any classes or anything like that. But I think just for me being in front of the camera all the time, being in the locker room, always kind of having to be an actor on the football field, it was just something natural that I did. And being a team leader, being vocal and being in front of people and all of that, it was a smooth transition for me once I was on camera. And so he, really encouraged me to pursue acting. So I took him up on it. Ended up getting an acting coach out in LA, and I started to book some jobs early. And being in class for 4, 5 years, becoming a trained actor not only gave me motivation to try something new in acting, but it also became kind of therapy for me coming from the game of football. It's a very emotionally and psychologically draining game. There's a lot of things that we deal with as football players that just aren't really conducive for the public to know. We're not supposed to be weak and vulnerable, but as an actor, those are your most powerful assets. And so it almost became therapy for me, acting. So yeah, it was an incredible transition. I'll always be thankful to Clifton Powell for encouraging me to get in this industry because it's been life-changing for me.
Thomas, I heard you say at some point, I'm not just a football player, I played football. So you were obviously someone who understood or made sure that football doesn't define you, who you are. I think there's a lot of players that struggle with that. So how did you make that distinction between identifying as a football player or just playing football?
That's a good question. I mean, growing up, my father and my parents both, but my father really pushed me to find balance between school and football. And as a kid, little specific things he would do. I would have to learn 5 new words every day. In high school, if I had 300 yards rushing on Friday night, on Saturday morning, obviously I'm looking for the newspaper to see the write-up and look at the sports section, but he would make me read the front page of the paper first before I could get to the sports section.
Wow.
So I think, little by little, my father was planting seeds, and hey, football is secondary. Being a good person, being a smart person, someone that's going to contribute to society is first. And that's one of the reasons why I chose the University of Virginia, because of their academic reputation, because I understood if I don't make it to the NFL, then I'll have a really, really good degree. And so I think over the course of my career, all those little seeds that my father had planted in my mind were always there. I will say, just in spite of that, it was still very hard because the NFL is a big deal. It's a big deal, millions and millions of fans, a billion-dollar corporation. And especially when you play 12 years, you have over 10,000 yards. And you play in major markets like Chicago and New York. It's very hard to not get sucked into that world of being defined as a football player. And I suffered, struggled a little bit once I retired with my identity. And like I said, acting helped me, realize who I really am outside of being a football player.
Well, tell me a little bit about the idea behind Johnson, which is going to premiere. Its second season premieres this week on Bounce, and how you got involved and what we can look forward to.
Yeah, so Johnson was created by my producing partner, Deji LeRae. It's an incredible show. I actually met Deji in 2017 and was introduced to the show. And we just immediately clicked behind just his creativity, but also his work ethic was similar to mine. And so Johnson was a show that he had already written a pilot episode for. And I read it and I said, wow, this speaks directly to me, as a man and specifically as a Black man. The show was about 4 Black men living in Atlanta, all best friends. And they all have different life experiences. They all have different conflicts. But they all have a commonality in that they share the same last name, Johnson. And Johnson stands for the Black male experience. And so it's a very relevant show. It's a very complex show, but it's a human show. Anyone can watch this show and be connected to these characters. And so once I read the script, Deji initially wanted me to be an actor, but I said, hey, this is an opportunity for me to produce again and be a bigger part of a team. like I was in football. And so I came on board as a producer and an actor, and then it turned into a second season of Johnson on Bounce TV now. It's Sunday.
It seems like, Thomas, it's more than just a role. Like there's a purpose behind it. How important is that for you to take a role when they come along, but to have one that's got some meaning?
It's very important because representation matters. Number one, just to see, um, successful, positive Black images on TV is very important. But also, me being a former NFL player, inspiring other NFL players and other athletes that you just don't have to be one thing. We're more than just football players. We're more than just basketball players. We're more than just the stereotypical people that we're pinned to be. And so it's twofold in that way for me. So I'm very passionate about the show. I'm very passionate about my character. My character, his name's Omar Johnson, and he's having some marital issues. And in season one, he was also going through some a custody issue with his son. And so we kind of just explore what that looks like, from the Black male POV. And in season two, things are off to a good start, but obviously there's some conflict somewhere. So you have to tune in this season, Sunday on Bounce TV, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, to kind of get a head start on Omar's journey for season two.
I'm sure you can't give away too much about season two, but when you look back at season one, was there like a specific episode or a scene maybe that you're most proud of, you enjoyed shooting the most?
I mean, that was such an incredible experience having your own TV show. My producing partner, Deji, and I, we're the showrunners as well. So we pretty much are in charge of everything, from the casting of the talent to the hiring of the crew, to the scripts, to the narratives. We're responsible for everything. We have two incredible partners, Cedric the Entertainer and Eric Rohn. When we initially shot our pilot episode, we took it to Cedric and Eric's company, Bird and Bear Entertainment, and they loved it immediately. And we just clicked, and we created a partnership, and that's how we ended up getting it to Bounce. But in regards to like one scene, I can't really think of one scene. I think they were all just so fulfilling because, once I finished each scene, I felt like I was creating something that was special, something that was different, and something that was needed. So right now I can't think of one particular scene, but I just know that it was a magical time for me. And this season was even more magical.
Thomas, well, I'm looking forward to seeing season two of Johnson on Bounce. But before we wrap up, some interesting developments in the NFL. And I wanted to ask you about this because I know a few years ago you had said you plan to, at some point, obviously it's posthumous, to donate your brain for research. And we learned this week that Demaryius Thomas had CTE.
Right.
Is that, do you still feel that way about the future? And what goes through your mind when you hear that about Demaryius?
Well, first of all, it's just tragic. Incredible man, incredible person, and obviously an incredible football player. Gone at such a young age. It's a complex conversation. It's very complex. It's like, what would have happened, if I wouldn't have been able to play football? And obviously, I know there's the whole question now about how young should kids play, and whether that makes a difference, and whether or not they're going to be susceptible to CTE. But that's the game we play. That's the sport we play. You have positives, which are you can be successful, you can be financially successful, you can live out your dreams, and then it's like anything else. There's negatives, and unfortunately, it's something like CTE because of all of the collisions. I think that I owe it to the younger players to help, do my part to get as much information as possible, as much research as possible in regards to donating my brain. I think a lot of the other NFL players, former NFL players, believe the same thing. But I don't think I don't see how we get around the conversation. I don't see how we get around the reality of it. I was fortunate enough to find acting something to keep my mind active, to keep me busy, to keep me ambitious. I'm meeting new people. I'm constantly creating ideas and thinking. Where a lot of guys, when they retire, they don't have anything that can simulate that same type of intensity that the NFL did, which I do. And so I can see how some guys might not be able to, sustain their train of thought or, what seems to be a normal life. It's very hard there's a lot of guys struggling that you don't hear about. A lot of times you hear about the players that were, were well known, but there's a lot of NFL players and college football players that are struggling because of football. So I don't know. I don't have the answers to that. Hopefully we can just continue to do more research. And guys, if they are having any kind of emotional or psychological issues, they'll reach out for help as opposed to trying to handle it themselves.
Sadly, sometimes, man, we hear about those issues too late after the fact. You don't have regrets about playing, do you? Now, knowing what you know now, would you maybe not have played?
I've been asked that question before. I love football, but because that was really all I knew, and now that I know so much more is out there besides football, maybe I would have had a change of heart. Maybe I wouldn't have played. But a lot of people in my position, football was my only outlet, just because of the environment that I was in and the situation I was in. It's almost like a one-way ticket. And I was able to use that ticket and leave and then be able to grow and evolve because of football. So that's why I said it's very complex. It's a very situational type conversation because everyone's situations are different. Everyone's environments are different. Everyone's opportunities are different. So I don't know. I've had this conversation before about my future kids. If they want to play, whether I would let them play or not. And initially, I always say no. So
it's a difficult question. It's a tough question. And I appreciate your honesty and your transparency, and really looking forward to checking out Johnson season 2 premieres on Bounce this Sunday, and appreciate you spending some time with me, Thomas. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.